Tom was having one of those perfect Saturday mornings. You know, the kind where everything just feels right. The sun was streaming through his kitchen window, his coffee was still hot, and the house was peacefully quiet. At 62, he had learned to appreciate these simple moments. His wife had passed away 3 years ago, and his grown children lived in different states. So these quiet mornings had become his favorite time of the week. He was reading the newspaper and thinking about maybe working in his garden later when he heard it. 3 soft knocks on his front door. Not the confident rap of a delivery person or the urgent banging of someone in trouble. Just 3 gentle, almost hesitant knocks. Tom set down his coffee cup and walked to the door, wondering who could be visiting so early on a weekend. When he opened it, he found himself looking down at 2 of the smallest visitors he'd ever had. A little girl who looked about 8 years old stood on his doorstep, and beside her was a boy who couldn't have been more than 6. Both children looked nervous, and the girl had clearly been crying recently, but what really caught his attention was the cardboard box the boy was holding so carefully in his small arms. The box had holes poked all around the sides, and Tom could hear tiny mewing sounds coming from inside. The little girl took a deep breath, like she was gathering all her courage, and looked up at Tom with the most serious expression he'd ever seen on such a young face. "Excuse me, mister," she said in a voice that was trying very hard to be brave. "Can you buy our kitten? Our mom is really sick, and we need money for her medicine." Tom felt his heart skip a beat. These weren't kids trying to make some pocket money for candy or toys. The weight of their situation was written all over their faces. The girl's hands were shaking slightly, and the boy kept looking between Tom and his sister like he wasn't sure what was happening, but knew it was important. "Our grandma said maybe someone in the neighborhood would want a kitten," the boy added quietly, his voice so soft Tom had to lean down to hear him properly. Tom crouched down to their level, trying to make himself less intimidating. "What are your names?" he asked gently. "I'm Lucy," the girl said, "and this is my little brother Danny. We live just a few streets over on Maple Avenue." As soon as she said the street name, something clicked in Tom's mind. Maple Avenue. That's where his old friend Mike used to live before he moved closer to downtown. Mike Thompson had been Tom's best friend for over 20 years. They'd worked at the same company, gone fishing together every summer, and shared countless barbecues in each other's backyards. Tom studied the children's faces more carefully. The girl, Lucy, had the most striking green eyes he'd ever seen. They reminded him of someone, but he couldn't quite place it. And the boy, Danny, had this distinctive cowlick in his brown hair that stuck up no matter what, giving him a slightly mischievous look even when he was being serious. "Thompson," Tom said suddenly, the memory hitting him like a lightning bolt. "Is your last name Thompson?" Both children looked surprised. Lucy nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. How did you know?" Tom's hands started trembling slightly. Mike Thompson had talked about his daughter constantly, especially in the months before he passed away 2 years ago. The daughter he'd had a falling out with years earlier over something Tom never fully understood. Mike had shown him pictures of his grandchildren, talking about how much he missed them and how he hoped to make things right with his daughter someday, but Mike had died of a sudden heart attack before that reconciliation could happen. And now here were those same grandchildren, standing on Tom's doorstep, in desperate need of help. "Your grandfather," Tom said carefully, his voice catching slightly, "was he Mike Thompson? Did he work at Patterson Construction?" Lucy's eyes went wide. "You knew our grandpa?" "But how? Mom said he didn't really have friends because they had that big fight before he died." Tom felt a wave of sadness wash over him. Mike had been heartbroken about the family estrangement, but he'd never stopped talking about his daughter and grandchildren. He'd carried pictures of them in his wallet and would pull them out whenever he'd had a few too many beers, telling Tom stories about Lucy's first day of school or Danny's obsession with dinosaurs. "Your grandfather was my best friend," Tom said softly. "We worked together for 20 years. He talked about you two all the time. He was so proud of both of you." Danny stepped closer to his sister, still clutching the kitten box. "Grandpa talked about us, but we never got to meet him. Mom said they had a big fight and couldn't fix it." Tom's heart was breaking. Mike had died with that relationship unrepaired, carrying the weight of missing his grandchildren's lives. And now, by some incredible twist of fate, those same grandchildren had come to him for help. "He loved you both very much," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "Even though he couldn't see you, he never stopped loving you. He had your school pictures in his wallet, and he knew all about Lucy's love for reading and Danny's dinosaur collection." The children exchanged amazed looks. Lucy wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Really? He really knew about us?" "Every detail he could find out," Tom assured her. "He would have done anything to help you if he'd known you needed it." Danny shifted the box in his arms, and a tiny orange paw poked through one of the holes. "This is Whiskers," he said, his voice getting even smaller. "We found him when he was really little and took care of him. But Mom can't work because she's sick, and the doctor said she needs expensive medicine. Grandma suggested we try to sell Whiskers to help with the money." Tom could see how much it was costing these children to even consider giving up their pet. The way Danny held the box so protectively, and how Lucy kept reaching over to gently touch the side of it, told him everything he needed to know about how much they loved this little kitten. "Can we show him to you?" Lucy asked hopefully. "He's really cute and friendly. We taught him to use the litter box and everything. We just want to make sure he goes to someone nice who will take good care of him." Tom nodded, and Danny carefully opened the top of the box. Inside was the tiniest orange kitten Tom had ever seen, probably no more than 8 weeks old. The kitten looked up at them with bright blue eyes and let out a small mew that went straight to Tom's heart. "He's beautiful," Tom said honestly. "You two have done a wonderful job taking care of him." Lucy smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. "Danny named him Whiskers because of his long white whiskers, and I taught him to come when we call his name." As Tom looked at these two brave children trying so hard to help their sick mother, he thought about his old friend Mike. Mike had made Tom promise, during one of their last conversations, that if he ever had a chance to help Mike's family, he would do it. Tom had agreed, never imagining that chance would literally knock on his door in the form of two desperate children and an orange kitten. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was Mike's way of finally bringing his family back together, even if he couldn't be there to see it happen. Tom's mind was racing as he looked at the two children standing on his doorstep. The realization that these were Mike's grandchildren felt like something out of a movie. He couldn't just let them stand there on his porch, especially not when they were carrying such a heavy burden for kids their age. "Why don't you both come inside for a minute?" Tom said gently. "We can talk properly, and maybe Whiskers would like some water." Lucy and Danny exchanged a quick look. Their mom had always taught them not to go into strangers' houses, but something about this kind man felt safe. Plus, he had known their grandfather, which made him feel less like a stranger. "Okay," Lucy said finally. "But just for a few minutes. We don't want to bother you too much." Tom stepped aside and let them into his living room. The house was clean but lived in, with family photos on the mantel and a comfortable-looking couch covered with a soft throw blanket. Danny immediately sat down carefully, still holding the kitten box like it was made of glass. "Let me get you both something to drink," Tom said. "Are you hungry? I think I have some cookies somewhere." "We're okay," Lucy said politely, though Tom noticed both children's eyes light up at the mention of cookies. Tom went to his kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of milk and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. As he set them down on the coffee table, he watched the children's faces. They were clearly trying to be polite, but he could tell they were hungry. "Please help yourselves," he said. "I made way too many cookies yesterday, and they'll just go stale if someone doesn't eat them." That wasn't entirely true, but seeing the children's grateful smiles as they each took a cookie made the small lie worth it. "Now," Tom said, settling into his favorite armchair across from them, "tell me about your mom. What kind of sickness does she have?" Lucy took a small bite of her cookie before answering. "The doctors say she has something wrong with her immune system. It makes her really tired all the time, and sometimes she gets sick really easily. She used to work at the grocery store, but she can't stand up for long hours anymore." Danny nodded seriously. Sometimes she has to stay in bed all day. And the medicine the doctor wants her to take costs a lot of money, way more than we have. Tom felt his chest tighten. He remembered Mike talking about his daughter, how proud he was that she'd become a single mother and was working so hard to take care of her kids. Mike had mentioned that she'd had some health problems, but he'd never gone into detail. "What's your mom's name?" Tom asked. "Rebecca," Lucy said. "Rebecca Thompson." "Well, it used to be Rebecca Martinez, but she changed it back after our dad left." The name hit Tom like a punch to the gut. Mike had talked about Rebecca constantly, especially in those last few months before he died. How much he missed her, how he wished he could fix whatever had gone wrong between them, how he dreamed of meeting his grandchildren someday. Tom remembered the night Mike had shown him Rebecca's high school graduation photo for the 100th time, tears in his eyes as he talked about how proud he was of her. "She's stubborn, just like me," Mike had said. "That's probably why we can't seem to work things out. But those kids of hers, Tom, they're everything to me, even though I've never met them." "Your grandfather," Tom said slowly. He never stopped. "Talking about your mom, or about you too. He carried your pictures everywhere." Lucy's eyes widened. "He had pictures of us? But how? Mom said they didn't talk for years." Tom smiled sadly. "Your mom might not have been talking to him, but that didn't stop your grandfather from caring. He had ways of finding out about you. School photos, report cards, anything he could get his hands on. He knew Lucy was the best reader in her class last year, and Danny, he knew all about your dinosaur book collection." Danny's mouth fell open. "He knew about my dinosaur books?" "He sure did. He even asked me once if I thought you might like to visit the Natural History Museum in the city. He was planning to invite you someday when things got better with your mom." Both children were quiet for a moment, processing this information. Lucy wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "We always wanted to meet him." Mom never really explained why they couldn't talk. She just said they had different ideas about things and couldn't agree. Tom knew the real story, though he'd never shared it with anyone. Mike had told him during one of their fishing trips, after a few beers had loosened his tongue. Rebecca had wanted to marry her boyfriend right out of high school, a guy Mike thought was trouble. Mike had been too harsh in his disapproval, said some things he couldn't take back. The boyfriend had left anyway, right around the time Rebecca found out she was pregnant with Lucy. But by then, the damage between father and daughter was done. Mike had tried to reach out when he heard about the baby, but Rebecca was too hurt and proud to accept his help. The years had passed, and the gap between them had only grown wider. When Danny was born a few years later, Mike had hoped it might be a chance to reconnect, but Rebecca had moved and changed her phone number. "Your grandfather made a lot of mistakes," Tom said carefully, "but not loving you wasn't one of them. He regretted every day that he couldn't be part of your lives." Lucy leaned forward. "Did he ever try to visit us?" "Many times. But your mom moved around a lot when you were little, and he could never quite catch up. He respected her wishes to be left alone, but it broke his heart." Danny had opened the kitten box and was gently petting Whiskers, who was purring softly. "Do you think Grandpa would have liked Whiskers?" Tom laughed, the first real laugh he'd had since the children arrived. "Are you kidding? Your grandfather loved animals? He had 3 dogs when I first met him. He would have spoiled that kitten rotten." "Really?" Lucy asked, brightening up. "Absolutely. He always said animals were better judges of character than most people." The children giggled at that, and for a moment, the heavy weight of their situation seemed to lift a little. Tom watched them, these 2 brave kids who were trying so hard to take care of their sick mother. He thought about Mike's final months, how he'd grown increasingly worried about his estranged family. Mike had made Tom promise that if anything ever happened to him, and if Tom ever had a chance to help Rebecca and the kids, he would do whatever he could. "I never thought I'd get the chance to keep that promise," Mike had said during their last conversation. "But if something happens to me, and they ever need help, will you be there for them?" Tom had promised without hesitation. Mike was his best friend, and the regret in his voice had been heartbreaking. Now, sitting in his living room with Mike's grandchildren, Tom realized this wasn't just a coincidence. This was Mike's way of finally bringing his family into Tom's life, creating the connection that had been broken for so many years. "Listen," Tom said, leaning forward in his chair. "I want to help you with more than just buying whiskers. Your grandfather would want me to do everything I can for you and your mom." Lucy shook her head quickly. "We can't ask for charity, mister. Mom says we have to earn our way." "It's not charity," Tom said firmly. "It's family helping family. And it or not, your grandfather made me part of your family a long time ago." Tom gently lifted little Whiskers out of the cardboard box, and the tiny orange kitten immediately began purring in his hands. The sound was so soft and sweet that it made his heart ache a little. He could see how much love and care these children had put into raising this little creature. Whiskers wasn't just clean and healthy, he was clearly well socialized and comfortable with people. "You two have done an amazing job with him," Tom said, stroking the kitten's soft fur. "Look how calm and happy he is." "That doesn't happen by accident," Danny beamed with pride. "We fed him with a special bottle when he was really little. And Lucy taught him to use the litter box by putting him in it every hour." "Every hour?" Tom asked, impressed. Lucy nodded seriously. "Well, almost every hour. Danny helped too. We took turns waking up at night to check on him when he was tiny." Tom was amazed by their dedication. These kids had essentially raised this kitten from infancy, sacrificing sleep and playtime to make sure he was properly cared for. It made what they were trying to do now even more heartbreaking. "So how much were you hoping to get for Whiskers?" Tom asked gently, though he dreaded hearing the answer. The children exchanged a look. Lucy bit her lip nervously. "We don't really know how much kittens cost. We were thinking maybe $50. Is that too much?" Tom's heart nearly broke right. There, $50. These sweet children thought $50 would somehow solve their family's medical crisis. They had no idea that their mother's medications probably cost hundreds of dollars every month, maybe more. "That seems like a fair price," Tom said carefully, not wanting to discourage them. "But can I ask you something? How much does your mom's medicine actually cost?" Danny shrugged. "A lot. Mom cries sometimes when she looks at the bills." "She thinks we don't see, but we do," Lucy nodded. "She tries to hide it from us, but we heard her on the phone with the pharmacy. They said something about $400, and Mom said she couldn't pay it right now. $400. Tom felt sick thinking about Rebecca trying to choose between her health and putting food on the table for her children. No wonder. She'd been getting sicker. She was probably rationing her medication or skipping doses entirely. "Has your mom applied for any assistance programs?" Tom asked. "Sometimes there are ways to get help with medical costs." "She tried," Lucy said sadly. "But she said there's a waiting list, and we make just a little bit too much money from her part-time job to qualify for some things. It's like we're stuck in the middle." Tom knew exactly what she meant. He'd seen it happen to other people. Making just enough to disqualify for aid, but not nearly enough to actually afford what they needed. It was a cruel trap that caught two. Many hard-working families, Whiskers had curled up in Tom's lap and was purring contentedly. The little kitten seemed to sense that this was a safe place with kind people. Tom watched the children watching their pet, and he could see the internal struggle on their faces. They loved this kitten desperately, but they loved their mother more. "Can I be honest with you both about something?" Tom asked. The children nodded. Their faces serious. $50 isn't going to be enough to really help your mom with her medicine costs. Not for more than a few days anyway. Their faces fell, and Tom immediately regretted being so blunt, but he felt they deserved honesty. "But," he continued quickly, "that doesn't mean we can't figure out a better solution." Lucy looked up hopefully. "What do you mean?" Tom's mind was racing. He was thinking about his promise to Mike, about these brave children, about Rebecca struggling alone with her illness. An idea was starting to form, but he needed to think it through carefully. "Well," Tom said slowly, "I'm getting older, and I've been thinking about getting a pet for company. But taking care of a kitten is a lot of work for someone my age. What if, instead of selling Whiskers to me, you let me hire you both as his caretakers?" The children looked confused. Danny tilted his head like a curious puppy. What does that mean? It means Whiskers would live here with me, but you two would come by every day after school to feed him, play with him, and make sure he's happy and healthy. I'd pay you both a weekly allowance for taking care of him. Lucy's eyes went wide. You mean we could still see him every day? Every single day, and on weekends too, if you want. Think of it like having two homes for Whiskers. Danny clapped, his hands together excitedly, but then his face fell. But would you pay us enough to help, Mom? Tom pretended to think about it seriously. Well, proper pet care is very important work. I think $50 a week would be fair, don't you? The children's jaws dropped. Lucy did quick math in her head. That's $200 a month. Is that too much? Tom asked innocently. I could make it 40 if 50 seems like too much responsibility. No, both children said at once, then looked embarrassed by their enthusiasm, but Tom was already thinking bigger than just the weekly allowance. While the children were distracted by Whiskers, who had woken up and was playfully batting at Danny's fingers, Tom was planning something much more comprehensive. He was thinking about his neighbor Helen, who was a retired nurse. She'd mentioned recently that the community health center where she volunteered was always looking for ways to help people navigate the medical system. Helen would know exactly what resources were available for someone in Rebecca's situation. He was also thinking about his former co-workers from the construction company. Many of them had moved on to other jobs over the years, and he still kept in touch with quite a few. Someone in his network had to know about job opportunities that would work for someone with Rebecca's health limitations. Then there was his church. They had a fund specifically for helping community members with medical emergencies. Pastor Williams was always looking for worthy families to assist, but many people were too proud to ask for help. And his late wife's book club still met at the library every month. Those women had been organizing meal trains and support networks for struggling families for decades. They were like a well-oiled machine when it came to community care. Tom realized he wasn't just thinking about helping one family anymore. He was thinking about mobilizing an entire community of people who would want to help if they only knew about the situation. The problem was that families like Rebecca's often suffered in silence, too proud or too overwhelmed to reach out. Mr. Tom? Lucy's voice broke into his thoughts. Are you sure about letting us take care of Whiskers? It's a really big responsibility. Tom looked at her serious little face and smiled. I'm absolutely sure. But I have one condition. The children waited nervously. You have to promise me that if you ever can't come by to take care of Whiskers, you'll call me ahead of time? Deal? They both nodded eagerly. And, Tom continued, I'd like to meet your mom sometime. If she's comfortable with it, of course. I'd like to tell her some stories about your grandfather, and maybe we can all figure out the best way to take care of each other. As Tom watched the children's excited faces, he thought about Mike and the promise he'd made. This was just the beginning of keeping that promise, and Tom was determined to honor his old friend's memory by making sure Mike's family never had to struggle alone again. The next morning, Tom woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Whiskers had spent his first night in Tom's house curled up on the couch, and the little orange kitten was already making himself at home. But Tom's mind wasn't on the kitten. It was on the promise he'd made to Mike and the family that needed help. He started his day by calling his neighbor Helen, the retired nurse who lived 3 houses down. Helen had worked at the community hospital for 35 years before retiring, and she still volunteered at the health center downtown. If anyone would know how to navigate the medical assistance system, it would be her. Helen, it's Tom, he said when she answered the phone. I need some advice about a family situation. 20 minutes later, Helen was sitting at Tom's kitchen table with a notepad, taking down all the details about Rebecca's condition and financial situation. She listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that showed just how well she understood the healthcare system. This is more common than you'd think, Helen said, shaking her head sadly. Families falling through the cracks because they make just a little too much to qualify for aid, but not nearly enough to afford what they need. But there are options. Helen explained that there were pharmaceutical assistance programs that many people didn't know about. Drug companies often had compassionate use programs for people who couldn't afford their medications. There were also local foundations that specifically helped with medical costs, and the hospital had financial counselors who could work with patients to set up payment plans or find additional resources. The problem is, Helen continued, most people don't know these programs exist, and when you're sick and overwhelmed, it's hard to navigate all the paperwork and phone calls. What if she had help with that? Tom asked. Helen smiled. That would make all the difference. I could make some calls this week, get the ball rolling on a few applications. Sometimes it just takes someone who knows how to talk to these people. Tom's next call was to his old foreman, Pete, who now worked for a different construction company across town. Pete had always been good at keeping track of people, and Tom was hoping he might know about job opportunities that would work for someone with Rebecca's health issues. Funny you should ask, Pete said when Tom explained the situation. My wife's company just started this new work-from-home program. They need people to do data entry and customer service calls. The hours are flexible, and you can work around doctor appointments and bad days. The pay isn't amazing, but it's steady, and they offer health insurance after 90 days. Tom felt a spark of hope. Do you think your wife could put in a good word? I'll talk to her tonight. Have Rebecca call the main office next week and mention Lisa's name. That should at least get her an interview. By Tuesday afternoon, Tom had made 7 more phone calls. He'd reached out to Pastor Williams at his church, who immediately offered to add Rebecca's family to the Emergency Assistance Fund. He'd called his late wife's book club leader, Mrs. Patterson, who got so excited about organizing help that she started making plans before Tom even finished explaining the situation. We haven't had a good project in months, Mrs. Patterson said. Enthusiastically, give me Rebecca's address and we'll start with a meal train, then we can figure out what else they need. Tom had also called his old buddy Frank, who ran a small auto repair shop. Frank mentioned that he'd been thinking about hiring someone part-time to handle his bookkeeping and appointment scheduling. Doesn't matter if they need to work around medical stuff, Frank said. Lord knows I've had my own health scares. We all need to help each other out. But the most important call Tom made was to Rebecca herself. Lucy had given him their phone number, and Tom had spent most of Monday evening working up the courage to dial it. He'd never spoken to Mike's daughter before, and he wasn't sure how she'd react to hearing from her father's friend after all these years. When Rebecca answered, her voice sounded tired and a little suspicious. Hello, Rebecca, this is Tom Bradley. I was a friend of your father's. Your children visited me this weekend, and I wanted to talk to you about that. There was a long pause. Tom could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Lucy and Danny mentioned you, she said finally. They said you knew my dad. I did. For over 20 years. And Rebecca, I know this might be hard to hear, but your father never stopped loving you. He never stopped thinking about you and the kids. Another pause. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice was shaky. He had a funny way of showing it. I know. You two had your differences. He told me about the fight, about how stubborn you both were. But Rebecca, he regretted it every single day. He carried pictures of your children in his wallet. He knew about Lucy's reading awards and Danny's dinosaur obsession. He never stopped caring. Tom heard what sounded like a sob on the other end of the line. He was planning to reach out to you again, Tom continued gently. He'd been working up the courage for months before he died. He just didn't know how to make the first move. I was going to call him too, Rebecca whispered. After Danny was born, I kept thinking about how Dad was missing out on knowing his grandchildren. But then years went by, and it felt like too much time had passed. It's never too much time for family, Tom said. And that's why I'm calling. Mike made me promise that if I ever had a chance to help you and the kids, I would do everything I could. He'd want me to be there for you now. They talked for over an hour. Rebecca told Tom about her diagnosis, about how hard it had been to work while managing her illness, about the constant worry of not being able to provide for her children. Tom told her about the resources Helen had found, about the job opportunities. Pete and Frank had mentioned about the community of people who were already mobilizing to help. "I don't understand," Rebecca said. "Why are all these people willing to help us? They don't even know us." "Because that's what communities do," Tom explained. "And because your father was loved by a lot of people, but mostly because Lucy and Danny are two of the bravest, most caring kids I've ever met. When people hear their story, they want to help." By Wednesday, the plan was fully in motion. Helen had already submitted 3 different assistance applications on Rebecca's behalf and had scheduled an appointment with a financial counselor at the hospital. Mrs. Patterson had organized a meal schedule that would provide dinner for Rebecca's family 3 times a week for the next month. Pete's wife had set up an interview for Rebecca for the following Monday. Tom spent Wednesday evening shopping for supplies to set up a proper space for Whiskers. He bought a comfortable cat bed, a scratching post, and enough toys to keep a dozen kittens entertained. When Lucy and Danny arrived after school on Thursday for their first official day as Whiskers' caretakers, they found the living room transformed into a kitten paradise. "This is amazing," Danny exclaimed, immediately getting down on the floor to play with Whiskers, who was attacking a feather toy with great enthusiasm. Lucy was more practical. She pulled out a small notebook from her backpack. "I made a schedule," she announced proudly. "Feeding times, playtime, litter box cleaning, everything." Tom was impressed by her organization. "You're taking this very seriously. Mom says if you're going to do a job, you should do it right," Lucy replied as Tom watched the children playing with Whiskers. He thought about Mike and how proud he would have been of his grandchildren. These kids had inherited their grandfather's strong work ethic and their mother's determination. With the right support, this family was going to be just fine. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Helen calling with good news about one of the assistance applications. Tom smiled as he answered, knowing that this was just the beginning of the good news this family was going to receive. 3 months later, Tom's house had become something he never expected it would be again, a home filled with laughter and life. Every afternoon at 3:30, he'd hear the familiar sound of running feet on his front porch, followed by excited voices calling, "We're here, Mr. Tom." "How's Whiskers today?" Lucy and Danny had kept their promise about taking care of the kitten, but somewhere along the way, they'd started taking care of Tom too. They'd noticed he sometimes forgot to eat lunch, so Lucy had started packing extra sandwiches in her school bag. Danny had appointed himself as Tom's daily entertainment committee, bringing new dinosaur facts and jokes every single day. "Did you know that some dinosaurs were as small as chickens?" Danny announced one Thursday afternoon, bursting through the front door with his usual enthusiasm. "And some had feathers." "Can you imagine a fluffy T-Rex?" Tom laughed as he always did at Danny's daily dinosaur lesson. The boy's excitement was infectious, and Tom found himself looking forward to these random facts almost as much as Danny enjoyed sharing them. Whiskers had grown from a tiny orange fluff ball into a sleek young cat who ruled the house with gentle authority. He'd claimed Tom's favorite armchair as his own, but somehow Tom didn't mind sharing. The cat seemed to sense when Tom was feeling lonely and would curl up in his lap, purring contentedly while Tom read the newspaper or watched the evening news. "He really loves you," Lucy observed one day, watching Whiskers knead his paws against Tom's sweater before settling down for a nap. "Mom says animals can tell when someone has a good heart." Rebecca had been coming by the house regularly for the past month, usually arriving just as the children finished their kitten duties. At first, she'd been shy and formal, still processing the complicated emotions of connecting with her father's best friend after so many years. But gradually, she'd relaxed into genuine friendship with Tom. The transformation in Rebecca had been remarkable to watch. The medication assistance programs Helen had helped her apply for had been approved, which meant she could finally take her medicine consistently without worrying about the cost. The stress lines around her eyes had softened, and she'd gained back some of the weight she'd lost during the worst of her illness. The work from home job with Pete's wife's company had been perfect for her situation. She could work around her medical appointments and rest when she needed to, but still bring in steady income. Even better, the health insurance had kicked in after 90 days, which meant regular doctor visits and preventive care that kept her condition stable. I never realized how much energy I was spending just worrying about money, Rebecca had told Tom the week before. Now that I don't have to choose between my medicine and groceries, I actually feel like myself again. Tom had also been surprised to discover how much he'd been missing having family around. His own children lived far away and visited only a couple times a year. Having Lucy and Danny around had filled a loneliness he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. The children had started calling him Uncle Tom without anyone suggesting it. It had just happened naturally one day when Danny was introducing him to a friend from school. "This is our Uncle Tom," Danny had said proudly. "He takes care of Whiskers with us, and he tells the best stories about our grandpa." And Tom did tell stories. Lots of them. He'd shared memories of Mike that helped the children understand their grandfather as a real person, not just the distant figure their mother occasionally mentioned. He told them about Mike's terrible cooking attempts, his fear of spiders despite being a tough construction worker, and his habit of talking to plants in his garden because he was convinced it helped them grow better. "Grandpa talked to plants?" Lucy had giggled. "That's so silly." "Your grandfather believed that everything deserved kindness," Tom had explained. "Plants, animals, people. He said you never knew what might need a little extra attention to grow." Properly, these conversations had helped Rebecca too. She'd been carrying guilt about the lost years with her father, but hearing Tom's stories helped her remember the good parts of their relationship before everything went wrong. "He really did love us, didn't he?" she'd asked Tom one evening while the children played with Whiskers in the backyard. "More than you'll ever know," Tom had assured her. He used to say that love doesn't have an expiration date. Even when people can't be together, the love is still there, waiting for a chance to show itself. The community support that had rallied around Rebecca's family had created lasting connections too. Mrs. Patterson's book club had essentially adopted the family, and Rebecca had started attending their monthly meetings. She discovered a love for mystery novels and had made several close friends among the women. Frank had been so impressed with Rebecca's work ethic and attention to detail that he'd offered her a permanent part-time position handling all his business paperwork. Between that job and the work-from-home position, she was earning more than she ever had at the grocery store. With much more flexibility, Pastor Williams had become a regular visitor, not because the family needed emergency assistance anymore, but because he genuinely enjoyed their company. He'd started a friendship with Tom that filled some of the social gaps both men had been experiencing as they got older. Even Helen had become like family. She'd taken on the role of unofficial health advocate for Rebecca, helping navigate insurance issues and keeping track of all the medical appointments. But more than that, she'd become a trusted friend and mentor. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Tom was sitting on his front porch watching Lucy teach Whiskers to walk on a leash in the front yard. The cat was tolerating the harness with dignified resignation, probably because Lucy rewarded every step with tiny treats. Danny was sprawled on the porch steps, working his way through a new dinosaur book that Tom had bought him during their last trip to the bookstore. Rebecca was in the kitchen helping Tom prepare lunch for everyone, though she'd insisted on taking over most of the cooking because she claimed Tom's idea of seasoning was salt and hope for the best. "You know," Rebecca said, joining Tom on the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea, "I keep thinking about what you said about Dad believing love doesn't have an expiration date." Tom looked at her curiously. "What about it?" "I think he found a way to show his love after all, through you, through all the people who've helped us. It's like he's still taking care of us, just in a different way." Tom felt his eyes get watery. Something that had been happening more often since Lucy and Danny had become part of his daily life. "I think you're right. Mike always was good at bringing people together, even when he wasn't trying to." Lucy looked up from her kitten training session. "Uncle Tom, are you crying again?" "Just happy tears," Tom said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Sometimes when you're really grateful for something, your eyes leak a little." Danny giggled. "That's silly. Eyes are for seeing, not leaking." "They're for both," Rebecca said, settling into the chair next to Tom. "And right now, they're seeing a pretty perfect afternoon. As Tom looked around at this unexpected family that had formed, around one small orange kitten, he thought about Mike and the promise he'd made. He'd kept that promise, but somewhere along the way, helping Mike's family had ended up helping him too. The house that had been too quiet for too long was now filled with the sounds of children and laughter. The days that had sometimes felt empty now had purpose and joy. Whiskers had finally figured out how to walk in his harness and was strutting around the yard like he owned the place. Lucy clapped her hands in delight, and Danny abandoned his book to cheer for the cat's achievement. "Come on, Uncle Tom," Lucy called. "Whiskers wants to show you his new trick." Tom stood up slowly, his knees creaking a little, and walked down to join his family in the yard. As he knelt down to pet Whiskers and praise his walking skills, he could almost hear Mike's voice in the gentle breeze, saying what he'd always said when something worked out perfectly. Sometimes the best things happen when you're not even looking for them.